I want to run something by you that may support you in the understanding or the deepening of the journey. And that is that maybe the individual, your issues, your wounds, your problems, and the kind of constant desire to fix them or change something about yourself, maybe that's not just your problem. We tend to individualize it and think that it's all our problem. Maybe you're a reflection of the greater whole. Maybe you're a reflection of the way our divided society frames the experience for each of us, in the sense that the goldfish, who's getting sick, is there actually anything really wrong with the goldfish? Well, there becomes something wrong with the goldfish, but largely it was induced because of the toxicity of the bowl and the water that it was swimming in. And so you change the water of the bowl, and then by and by something starts to happen to the fish, and maybe it starts to get healthy again. And while that is a simplistic way of looking at it, because there are many nuances to the experience of being human, family problems, the wounds of the family, abuse, trauma that we experience, still we're a reflection within ourselves of the way our society functions. And the way our society largely functions is to be divided into the appearance of what we are. Here we are, functioning on society. It doesn't matter what's wrong with you, just get on with it, get your job, get married, have kids, the usual sort of humdrum, way of being. But whatever you do, push the shadow into the background, deny the wound. We live in a deny the wound kind of society. We really do. And maybe you're a reflection of that. So it's not just a personal problem. To not take it so personally, to step away from the utter extreme isolation of the personalization of the wound, allows for something to soften. It's not just my wound, in other words, it's the wound of the whole. And my healing is the awareness of that actually starts to heal the whole in and of itself. So there's a great seeing in that. There's a great seeing. There's a great possibility of awareness to fall into a sort of softer way of being with one's own wound, with one's own pain. It doesn't solve the problem necessarily of one's own pain or wounding, but it does contextualize it. Because you start to see, and I've talked about this in videos before, you start to see the same wound in a different way, in a different sort of form in you, but you start to see it in other people. Wherever I look, I see the same wound now. It has a different sort of manifestation, unique to the individual that's carrying it, but ultimately it's the same wound. And I'm not going to name what that wound is, because that's not the point of this video. But it's, it's like it's the same. And the reflection that society, that other people give us, supports us in actually saying on its basic level, I'm not alone. I feel alone. I feel that this wound is all mine. I'm all alone in the world. This has happened to me. It shouldn't have happened to me. and now I have to solve it because there's no great context for it. So then I have to go on the healing path, I have to go to the therapist, I have to, etc., etc., take on this burden on my own. And we do have to do the work on our own, but we suffer from the fact that the greater context is not a healing environment. So what you're carrying is a reflection and a microcosm of the greater whole. I'm not talking about solutions. Don't jump straight to the solution. First see. First develop awareness. The more awareness you can develop, the greater your kind of depersonalizing of it. Because if you see the same thing everywhere and you recognize that it's actually not just an individual problem, you're not just the only victim of the personal history, but that there are millions and millions of victims of personal history out there, that the same wound, the wound of one is the wound of many. Then it sort of starts to develop a deeper compassion, a compassion for the many, and also a compassion for the one, for the self. And that compassion is the softening. Sometimes I really think that the 20th century and now the 21st century became the centuries of neurosis. As we moved out of a kind of survivalism, we moved into recognizing the wound. But in recognizing the wound, we had no context for healing it. And so then we internalize it and neurotify it. So we make it not through any fault of our own, but because the context isn't there, a certain neurotic picking over it. It's funny, we live in a society that doesn't value health in the sense of holistic health. We live in a society that actually seems to want people to be sick, stupid, poor, cut off from spirit, divided, miserable. Maybe that's because we're easier to control like that. And so, society doesn't value your healing. So you constantly, if you get on the healing path, constantly butting up against the dysfunctionality of society. And that's why you have to go beyond society. The hidden moral code and ethical code of society is largely dysfunctional, and is sort of predicated on a certain kind of sickness, a sickness of inner division and outer division. And that's why you can't really look to the bowl. You can't actually look to the goldfish bowl because nobody's going to change the damn water. Oh, but they would. If we lived in a wisdom culture. But we don't. We live in a stupid, divided, aggrandized, narcissistic culture. Not everybody, but the crap has gone to the surface. And so those in power perpetuate division. Inner division, outer division. It's just endless. And this is part of the age that we're in. But so if you can't look to society, but you can see it. You can see what's going on. And then you can make deep choices to stop taking it so personally and to move out of that into a deeper seeing. You might step out of taking it so personally, but you still have to deal with your karma personally. But you can see the greater context where a society that is built on dysfunction doesn't support your healing. That either crushes you or it galvanizes you. I would suggest and implore it to galvanize you, to refuse to be dictated to by the dysfunctionality society, of a culture, let's call it. It's a cultural thing. Not for everybody, of course, but I'm talking about the wounded part of culture. This is a really important insight that we can have, because it points it back to being our responsibility, but not as the victim, as the one who refuses to be dictated to and defined by the dysfunctionality and the denial and the shadow holding of the culture that we happen to be born into. This is the time to transform all of that. You know, we live in a culture that doesn't value grief. We live in a culture that doesn't express its true anger. We live in a culture that, screws people up because everybody's screwed up. We live in a culture that denies its shadow and then acts it out on the surface. We live in a, really pretty stupid culture, apart from some technology, but even the technology gets manipulated to deception, to deceive people. What is this about? Why are we deceiving each other? Why? For what? For power? Nobody knows. I can't understand what the end game is. It was just a perpetuation of stupidity. So don't let that stupidity, that denial, that dysfunctionality become yours. Rise up. Refuse to be dictated to. Yeah, everything, there's terrible things have happened in your life. Terrible things happened in my life. But still, because my parents were born into the dysfunctional world as well. So they passed it on to me. But by and by, as I've gone through a profound healing journey and, change and transformation, the dust has cleared from my eyes, and I'm able to see that largely I was the product of the 70s. I was the product of dysfunctionality. I was the product of the inability of the masculine to meet the feminine, to express the wounded side of themselves. So they acted it out. We're all the product of something. And so one has to galvanize oneself, one's true inner flame, to decide that you're not going to be dictated to by dysfunctionality, others' dysfunctionality. And that causes the start at least of a great rising up within us into our power, into our authority, to decide for ourselves no or yes. So, that's my pitch this morning. I hope it speaks to you. Many blessings.